Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys, a former D1 hooper, current high school coach, teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari and Bryce, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
Shout out to Detroit Pistons UK and all the Pistons in the UK. They DM'd me about the game in France. So Omari, before we talk about tonight's game versus the Raptors, I wanted to shout out them. And also, are you going to that game in France later in the season for the Pistons?
No, I'm not going to be in France, unfortunately. It would have been a good one, but couldn't make it happen this year. But, definitely be watching at home. And, I guess for me, from a beat writing standpoint, it would just be a very rare 8-day gap during the season. But definitely an exciting game for all the Pistons fans in France. One thing I've learned doing this job is that there's Pistons fans all over the world. Like I have Pistons fans. There's a Turkish Pistons account that I see on Twitter a lot. Every country seems to have a pretty strong Pistons base. So I don't think that's the case necessarily for a lot of teams. When I covered the Grizzlies, I didn't see that. So Pistons fans get around.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's why I wanted to give the shout out, because there is a fan base. If you're on Twitter, there's like you say, the Turkey one, the UK, Brazil, all over the place. It's really, really cool. And we'll talk about it later, because whenever we were together this past weekend, we talked about kind of the diversity of the city of Detroit, where people have come from, where people have gone. And so it is nice having Pistons fans from all over the place. But tonight, our Pistons did take another loss, this time at the hands of the Toronto Raptors. First, Omari, can you give our listeners an update on the Isaiah Stewart injury? That was kind of the biggest news coming out of this game.
Yeah, he left the game toward the end of the second quarter. Pass toward him kind of slid out of bounds. He chased out of bounds and fell into the protection barrier. Ruled out of the game. Pistons called it a right foot sprain. And then after the game, Dwayne Casey said that they don't have any updates. Per usual, they usually don't have updates right after the game. But I guess he kind of jammed his toe. So it doesn't sound super serious, but he also had it was a very noticeable limp, I would say, as he was walking off of the court. So that's definitely a TBD. And just poor timing, obviously. I mean, this team's had injury after injury. You just get Alec Burks and Marvin Bagley back, and now Cade's out, and Corey missed Monday's game with some hip soreness, I believe. And now you have Isaiah Stewart. Can't say if he's going to miss any time yet. They have 2 days off. Wednesday and Tuesday before they played the Lakers and Clippers Thursday and Friday. So maybe those 2 days will give them some time to get back healthy, but just poor timing overall, I think.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate, and we'll talk about the new starting lineup in just a second, but I will say I came away pleased whenever I heard it was a toe. I assume that is way better than the knee, which it looked like he grabbed his knee. I was tweeting with you back and forth, and I was really nervous about it based off the way he kind of was holding his leg and walking around. And I didn't think the injury even came from actually hitting the stanchion or the protective barrier, but it did. And so hopefully we'll get more news on that. He'll be able to make the West Coast trip, and we'll see him back in the lineup. Before we talk about the new starting lineup, Omari, can you give some perspective? I know you guys asked Dwayne Casey about playing his former team, the Toronto Raptors. What did he say about that? Does he do anything different? Did he coach any different? Did you get any sort of different vibe as you were sitting with him in the media room before the game?
No, he was actually asked about it before the game, and he said, he doesn't do anything different. He doesn't coach the guys differently leading up to the game, and he doesn't give a speech or anything. I think he is. They had won 6 straight before Monday, and they had won. I think his first 3 against the Raptors as well. So overall, he still, I think, has a winning record against his former team. But if you let Dwayne say it, it's just a coincidence. It's nothing special, nothing fancy going on. Only he can answer if there truly is still any bad blood against his former team. But we ask him about it pretty much every single time, and every time it's the same answer. He doesn't change anything.
Imagine knowing Dwayne Casey, even if there were some certain feelings coming from him, he wouldn't let the public know or the media know. And I could see him not making a big deal with the team, just kind of being a professional about those type of things. We did see a new starting lineup, Omari. You guys were kind of alluding to it on Twitter, and I text you. I was getting excited because you could tell that there was a big move. It wasn't something really simple. So Marvin Bagley III actually inserted into the starting lineup for Sadiq Bey. What did you think about that when you first saw that starting lineup come out from Pistons PR?
The Pistons have talked a lot about playing two bigs together this season, and the main holdup up until this point is just the injuries. Obviously, you don't have Bagley, so you stagger Isaiah Stewart and Duran, and then, Bagley, he finally came back over the weekend, and you enter this game with three bigs, really only for the second time this season. So just go ahead and put them back into the starting lineup. They want to play with size up front. And I also think the second unit, I think more so than just the two big lineup, the second unit needed help. And I think just Boyan and Sadiq having similar games, it just makes sense to kind of break them up and move one of them to the bench just to get the bench an extra score, which Alec Burks, he's been really good. And then Bagley previously kind of gave that unit a little bit of extra work. But I think if you just look at sort of the balance, Isaiah Stewart has been shooting the ball really well, 40% from three, in his 9 games entering tonight. So he could play off of Bagley offensively, and then you have Duran coming off of the bench. So you just look at the spacing issues I think that second unit had, and you kind of alleviate that a little bit by breaking those that big man unit of Bagley and Duran, I think, up, and then putting Bagley in the first unit. So still a work in progress. Dwayne said it's something you'll still continue to look at. But he talks about balance a lot, and I think that was a move just to kind of find balance between those two units.
And they did. They started off the game. Bagley and Stu each hit a 3. Bagley hit the first one from the top of the key, and then Stu knocked one down as well. I thought the lineup looked really good, Omari. I didn't think there was major spacing concerns with those two on the floor together. I thought the offense flowed pretty well together, when sometimes I don't think the offense flows really well in the half court. What did you think about that combination whenever you saw it? And did you guys get a chance to ask Coach Casey about how he felt about it before Stewart obviously went down?
I think Dwayne felt pretty good about it. He said something I thought was interesting before the game, which is when Isaiah Stewart's knocking shots down, he's a power forward and then center in that order, which, I think kind of continues what they've talked about with Isaiah this whole time, in the sense that he's a little undersized for a big, but, he's got good defensive technique defending the perimeter. And if he can hit shots, then there's really nothing stopping him from playing the 4 full time. I mean, he's, improved as a screener in his career. 40% from 3. He was like 10 of 25, I think, in those 9 games before Monday night. And you just look at their schedule, too, just so front loaded with other teams that have 2 bigs, right? Like, you play the Cavs, you play the Hawks twice, you play the Celtics twice, you play the Knicks twice. It kind of shows, I think, what the Pistons want from that. So I thought offensively they actually looked pretty good to start the game. We talk about just sort of the vertical spacing to get with Bagley, and Bagley was, he was okay tonight. I think he's still kind of getting his wind back under him, but, to see Isaiah go 2 of 2 from 3, I think he missed. I think he finished the night 2 of 2 from 3 actually before
I believe
he exited the game. So that's what you want. Like, I mean, if he hits, 2 of every 5 3-pointers for the rest of the season, then that is a perfect season, and that entirely justifies this experiment of moving behind the arc. And not a huge sample size, but tonight I thought he did look pretty good playing the 4 in those lineups.
Yeah, I thought that lineup looked really good, and I thought it could be a little bit clunky, especially the first time we've seen it started anyway. And I don't even know if those guys played together on Saturday night, Stu and Bagley. They may have spent some minutes together. Do you think the Pistons would have started the season this way if Bagley was healthy? Because that's what was interesting to me, is it only took Bagley's second game of the season coming back from the injury, and they already went to it. That kind of tells me, Omari, that this may have been the plan from the beginning of the season if everybody was healthy.
The Boyan unit with him and Sadiq next to each other, I still think that would have been a strong likelihood for the beginning of the season. But I think that is, some of that might be hindsight being 2020, just because Bagley got hurt either in that second or third preseason game, so we couldn't see that all the way through. So there's probably some missing information that the coaching staff didn't have in that moment. But, I think just with Bagley being out, and you kind of see the issues that the second unit had with him out, and then, he comes back, and that second unit obviously has very bad spacing with him and Duran together, which, on paper I think you expect, but they kind of had to roll with it, especially with Hami in that group as well. The coaching staff, I think, kind of had it in their mind that it was a possibility. And, I think that last game gave them all the evidence they needed to just go ahead and break those units up and try something new. So I don't know if that would have been the starting lineup on day one, but, I do think that it was a possibility had Bagley not gotten hurt.
So I want to talk about Isaiah Stewart just individually, Omari, because at least from watching on the TV, he seems to be showing even more outward emotion, and not in a negative way, but even towards his teammates, like frustration, like, hey, you should have got the rebound or you should have done this. Is that something you've picked up on? You sit there courtside every game. Is that something you've noticed with Isaiah Stewart, or maybe am I just seeing it more? I feel like he's making a conscious effort to almost be the voice of this team. And I feel like kind of the heart and soul of the team. I wonder about the energy tonight whenever he got hurt. It seemed like the team was in a little bit of a funk until the fourth quarter when Jaden Ivey kind of took over. Am I reading a little bit too much into it, or you think Isaiah Stewart is kind of taking on that role and responsibility with this team?
No, I think he is. He knows who he is. He knows he's an emotional leader for this team. I think personality-wise, he's one of the more fiery players on the team. And I think that's part of his growth, for all these young guys really is figuring out, how they could lead this team. Kelly and Sadiq are not the most vocal guys. They're more so lead by example. And we've talked about Cade, being a pretty natural leader since day one. But, Isaiah, really, I think we've seen him grow more comfortable in this role. And, this season, I think has been just a leap for him overall, getting to the line where knocking out threes. His rebounding has been better. But I think vocally as well, he's taking a step forward, too.
Yeah, I just think emotional and energy-wise, I feel like he's taken that step forward, like you're saying. Even going back to the clip where Jaden Ivey was going to help some opposing team player up, and Stu grabbed him and pulled him away. He's like, no, we're not going to do that. I continue to notice those type of things with Isaiah Stewart and just kind of being that guy for his team. Let's get to the actual game. And it was a little bit frustrating because it feels like the Pistons had every chance to win this game, Omari, but very poor three-point shooting, somewhat poor from the free throw line, even though they continued to get there a boatload of times, and they had 19 turnovers, a bunch in the first quarter in the first half. If you had to pinpoint one of those things that contributed ultimately to this loss, what do you feel like it was?
I would say the free throws, number one. You take 43 free throws and you knock down 31, so that's 12 misses at the line. I think in the 4-point loss, that was a 2-point game with about 10 seconds left. Is especially killer. Boyan took 10 attempts and he made 6, so, uncharacteristic for him to miss 4 of them. Ivy missed a couple. Yeah, I know it was just a group effort. Burks took 5 and missed 2. Hamdi missed 1. Ivy missed a couple. But just up and down the roster kind of adds up. And, I think for Toronto to take 15 fewer free throws and only make 4 less, you had a huge advantage in that area that, you essentially eliminated because you missed so many of them. You make 2 more and you tie the game with 2 seconds left. That might, make the difference tonight. So I would say, and that's what Dwayne said after the game too, free throws were a big reason why. The 3-point shooting, they were 10 of 31, a little bit under 33%. Toronto didn't shoot that well either, so, that's a little bit of a wash, but you could always shoot better. And then the other thing for me was the turnovers. So they had 9 turnovers just in the first quarter alone. And then they finished with, I want to say, 19.
19, yeah.
Tonight, which is not ideal. So, turnover issues have sort of been a problem on and off this season. But tonight, you can't miss 12 free throws. I think when you have that big of an advantage, you take 15 more and then you miss 12. That's you have to take care of those. They didn't do it tonight. So I think it really just is as simple as that. You can turn the ball over, you can miss threes, but you got to take the easy ones and make the easy ones too.
Well, and what's frustrating is they earned those trips to the line. The Toronto Raptors were very aggressive tonight, played very hands-on, trapping, all of those things. And the Pistons, for the most part, got a decent whistle. I think at certain times the officials got tired of calling so many fouls on the Raptors, and I think that's what they count on. But we've seen this team consistently put pressure on the lane, put pressure on the rim, get fouls drawn on the other team, and get to the free throw line. And it is just it's disappointing that kind of was the crux at them not winning this game. A game, Omari, I feel like they needed to win, not just because the Raptors were shorthanded, because the Pistons were shorthanded as well. Cade was out. Stu eventually was out. Burks and Bagley probably don't have their legs completely back yet. But now they're about to go on a 6-game West Coast trip, and those are going to be some really tough wins to get as well. And so I thought this was a big one, just kind of for the morale of the team. And then you end up losing. You kind of have some self-inflicted wounds, and Isaiah Stewart goes down with injury. I kind of wonder where the morale is going to be going into LA this week.
It's tough. I think this is the one you wanted to get. You have a track record of recent success against Toronto, and you play them down to the wire. And now you play the Clippers and then the Lakers. And the Lakers are one of the teams in the NBA that are just as bad as the Pistons. So maybe that's one that you'll be able to get. But then you have, and then you have Sacramento after. So, you have some games that, might be toss-ups. But it is tough. This team really can't give up, I guess, any of the games that you may consider 50-50 games. And Toronto's a good team, so, on paper, that's not a 50-50 game. But they played them right down to the wire without Cade. So I guess that's one thing kind of hanging over all of this is they're without their best player. So, maybe you don't expect them to hang around as much as they have. But, you're seeing guys like Ivy step up, like up and down the roster. I think you still have enough talent to win. So that makes these losses feel a little bit different. But from a depth standpoint, you're able to replace some of the production you're losing, but you're still falling up short because of preventable errors.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, Cade is out. Stu came out, looked like he was going to have a really good game, and then he gets hurt. Again, Bagley and Burks don't have their legs completely under him yet. And then Bojan Omari probably had the worst game he's had this season in terms of the missed free throws, the missed open threes, and the turnovers from him. So all of those things combined with the team free throws, three-pointers, and turnovers, it just it's almost amazing they were as close as what they were. Like, to me, it speaks to they're competing. They're doing some of the little things that don't always show up in the stat sheet because they lost this game and had a chance right down to the wire to win it.
I mean, I think you have to have a certain level of play to be able to stay in these games, despite the mistakes. And some of that just is the depth. Alec Burks, he's had 32 combined points in 2 games. That helps a lot. Like, he hasn't really missed a beat, despite his 7-month layoff recovering from a navicular fracture in his left foot, which I'm not going to lie, I didn't know what the navicular was before Alec Burks joined the team, and I've had to write it a lot in the last 6 weeks or so. So a left navicular fracture that he finally returned from. But again, I think on the other hand, when you are a team that wants to compete and you are competing in a lot of these games, you're just falling short and you have not had a full complement of players all the way through. Like we saw the 2 big lineup return tonight and, the previous game. And then Isaiah Stewart gets hurt, so you just have a rotating chair. Like Durham's with a couple of games, you've had just a rotating set of chairs for your front court. There's just been a lot I think the teams had to juggle pretty early. And there's still a chance that once they get a fully healthy roster, we see them turn around a little bit. But at the same time, all teams have injuries. Like, I know that's something Dwayne will say whenever we bring up the injury bug, that all teams have to do it for you still figure out how to win. I think it's just there's a difference between a team that already has like 2 superstars dealing with injuries and a team like the Pistons that doesn't have one and they're trying to get guys to that point dealing with it. So, I think a lot of encouragement through 15 games, but also a lot of understandable frustration as this team is still losing a lot more than it's winning thus far.
Yes, I say there's a difference, right, with the Pistons, who are already limited in terms of just the overall talent. And when they lose their best player, it's a little harder to overcome that than, say, the Celtics, whenever they don't have their second best player in Jaylen Brown, but Jason Tatum can go drop almost 50 like he did on Saturday night. I also want to say, I don't want to get into the Dwayne Casey conversation again tonight, Omari. My timeline was filled with people and critiquing and all that. Dwayne Casey has overtaken Killian Hayes as the most polarizing figure in the Detroit Pistons organization. And I'm sure we'll have to talk about it again eventually. I don't want to go on another rant like we did last week, but it just continues to kind of surprise me in a game where I didn't think he did anything that crazy. He switched up the lineup like everybody wanted, and this team competed with against all of the stuff that we've talked about. And again, he just has become so polarizing. I just find it really interesting that it continues to become more and more with Dwayne Casey and this fan base.
It's a little funny because when they announced the decision to bring, or when we tweeted out the decision for them to bring Sadiq Bey off of the bench, I think a lot of people agreed that maybe putting one of him or Bojan on the bench would make sense, just, for reasons we've discussed. And then when I tweeted it out, there was a mix of people saying, yeah, this should work, and also fire Dwayne Casey. So it's hard for me to kind of parse through which criticisms kind of take seriously and which ones are just people overreacting sometimes, because anything that could remotely be construed as being controversial is going to incite the fire Dwayne Casey talk. I was talking to somebody the other day. They were like, Dwayne Casey, look at his record with the Pistons. Why is he still a coach? And I'm like, they've been rebuilding the entire time. The year before Trey Weaver started, like Blake was hurt. Like what coach is going to win under these circumstances, right? And I think there's always things you could do better. Like, I'm not saying Dwayne's perfect, but I'm just saying, I think in the grand scheme, the thing that I think frustrates people most about him, one of the things is that sometimes he can be slow to make overarching adjustments. But for me, it's hard for me to get to that level for a team that just has not had time to win. And I don't think there's any inherent issue with him letting things play out first. Like, even if on paper it's something that's not going to work out, give it a chance. Why not? I mean, I think it's fair to say this team's probably not going to make the playoffs this year, so there's not a lot of harm in letting these things play out.
I just think it's interesting that they feel like they have to use him as the scapegoat for losing whenever this team is supposed to lose. Like, we don't need a scapegoat for losing because the team's not very good. This team is going to lose. I think what happened this year, Omari, truthfully, is the expectations were way too high from the fan base. And I think last season, the expectations were too high for the fan base, but a lot of people were able to quickly adjust those expectations when the Pistons started out so poorly and were getting blown out of a lot of games. And this year, I don't think that recalibration is happening right now, where I think we just came in with too high expectations for some of the players individually, for this team as a whole. National media was talking about possible play-in. I don't know that either one of us really saw that unless everything broke the right way, and things haven't broke the right way, Omari. We haven't seen the 10 best players on this team suit up on a given night yet. What was tonight? Game 15? Was this the 15th game of the season?
Yeah, this was game 15, yeah.
No, I don't think the top 10 players, I'm almost positive, have not suited up for a single game. If you gave the best 10-man rotation, or what I think it is, if everybody's healthy, those 10 guys have not suited up on the same night yet this year. So things haven't broke perfect in terms of injuries. The shooting has gone up and down and all over the place. And so I think expectations were too high, and we have to recalibrate what our expectations are for this team. And then you could, quote unquote, judge Dwayne Casey's performance a little more fairly.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was some talk about the play-in and this and that. And Trey Weaver says they want to compete. And that kind of gets people excited. And, I think a lot of times people make predictions for the Pistons sort of in a vacuum without really looking at the rest of the NBA. Now, we've talked about it. Like, I don't think either of us have them winning more than, say, 33, 34 games. And I think my prediction was actually 14 for the East, just because I look at the East and I'm like, I see 13 teams, at least.
Those rosters looked better.
Are very clearly better. I would say there's 13 teams in the East. I probably have one proven all-star. And even the Orlando Magic, who are right there with the Pistons, I thought could have a sneaky good year. But I did have the Pistons finishing over them. But beyond that, the only teams I thought they had a realistic chance of overtaking were like the Charlotte Hornets. And then maybe if the Brooklyn Nets absolutely just collapsed, which they've been on the verge of doing, maybe them. But even teams in the middle, like the Washington Wizards, you saw Bradley Beal and Kristaps. You look at the Charlotte Hornets, you still have LaMelo, who just came back recently, I believe, and Terry Rozier. They've had some injuries, but those teams have talent, proven talent, and I think it's hard to predict the Pistons to do significantly better than last season when, even with an improved roster, there's still so much room for them to make up.
I was the same way. With the Wizards and the Knicks, I saw people saying, the Pistons roster is just as good as those teams. I'm like, I respectfully disagree. I just don't see how the Pistons roster is. So we kind of went down this more than I was planning on. We're going to take a short break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the individual performances or not performances this week. The injury to Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey and Killing Hayes playing really well, and more.
All right. Hey, Carlos, just a quick idea. How about if I say, hey, this is Sean Windsor, and you say, hey, this is Carlos Morales, and I'll go, and then we'll go back. You want to try that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. You ready?
Yep.
Hey, this is Sean Windsor.
And this is Carlos Benares.
And we are the team behind Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean, where we are going to talk about, you guessed it, sports, but lots of other stuff. Like what, Carlos?
We're going to talk about your favorite subject, Sean, food. Probably more food. Arts, culture, sports, TV, movies, you name it. If it's happened in Detroit, we're going to talk about it.
And sometimes we're going to have guests in who obviously know a lot more than we do about just about everything. But we're going to have some free press journalists to talk about big stories, folks from the sports world. We're going to be out every Thursday. You can find this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We hope you'll join us.
All right, we're back, and we're going to talk about some individual performances. So let's lead off with one of the rookies, Jaden Ivey. He scored 20-plus points in back-to-back games. He had a career-high 26 against the Celtics last Friday, and then I think he scored 13 of his 21 in the fourth quarter against the Raptors on Monday. And I think he's finding a little bit of a comfort level. He wasn't super efficient against the Raptors, but I think you look at the passing especially, the 8 assists and just the way he's able to weaponize getting downhill and finding the open man. I love the pass he had toward the end of the fourth quarter where he drives and the entire defense collapses and he just delivers a perfect pass to the corner to, Isaiah Livers for a 3 that cut the deficit to 4-3. It's stuff like that I think to see him make those types of plays under pressure bodes well for his future development, given that one of the biggest question marks was, can he be that primary creator? And he's been that through 15 games.
Yeah, he had one to Boyan as well that Boyan just simply missed. And I thought he took over the fourth quarter. Early in the fourth, the offense was real stagnant in the half court. And essentially, Coach Casey gave Jaden Ivey the ball and just said, hey, go be a dude. Go be a playmaker. Go be a creator. And he really was able to do that. And I know there's turnovers at times. There's frustration turnovers. On Saturday, whenever I had a chance to be there post-game in the media, you could see his frustration when he walked in the room. I'm like, this kid, at least he puts it on. Like, he's extremely competitive and he really hates to lose. He was extremely frustrated and he took a lot of the onus on himself with the turnovers and areas where he needs to grow. But I think he's been really good and the passing has been spectacular for him, especially for a guy who that wasn't really talked about a lot coming into the league. And you're right. I sat here and said over and over and over, he's not a point guard. He's not a point guard. He's not a point guard. Well, he's been playing as the primary point guard creator the last few games with Cade Cunningham out, and he certainly hasn't looked bad at all. So I don't think that that's still what he's going to do on this team. I still think that's Cade, but he can definitely take that load when necessary.
He can, and it's good because his play style lends himself to being ball dominant, I think, very well. Just given that what he does best just requires him to have the ball in his hands. He didn't shoot the ball super well tonight, but just the way he gets downhill, he gets 4 or 5 sets of eyes on him every single time, and he's consistently made the right pass. His assist to turnover ratio hasn't been amazing this season, but I can see him making a pretty big leap as a playmaker in year 2. And I'm also just going to read off his averages after tonight real quick because, people said we were hating on Jaden Ivey. I disagree. I think we try to be pragmatic, right? We try not to get, too excited, not get too high or too low, as they like to say, in sports. But he's averaging 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. And his shooting splits are 44% overall, 34% from 3, and 74% at the line, which I think is extremely healthy. He's averaging a pretty efficient 16 points right now, and he's moving the ball well. So, through 15 games, I think he's probably been close to, at least through my eyes, I think this is probably close to the best case scenario, for him this early in his career so far.
Yeah, I mean, this is as good as you could imagine, Omari. With even the 3-point shooting has been solid. I think on Saturday he shot it really well against the Celtics. And, there's some games where it looks a little rough, and then other games he comes back, knocks him down. I'll continue to say, and we don't have to talk about it in depth, but the mid-range is the area for me that has to come around for him, the floater or the mid-range pull-up, whatever it ends up being. But he's done a lot of things much better than I anticipated in terms of changing pace, playing with patience, the passing, all of those things. I will say, just so we're completely unbiased and fair here, he's got a lot of room to grow on the defensive end, on and off the ball. He gets beat on the ball. He has some good possessions here and there, but off the ball, getting beat on back doors, missing rotations, the communications with switching or not switching, navigating screens. He has a lot of work to do in that aspect. He is a rookie, and most rookie guards aren't very good, but that's something I'll definitely keep an eye on throughout this season, and then obviously going into his second year, third year, and beyond.
He has a lot of work to do defensively, and I think guards who were not great defensively in college typically are not great defensively when they come to the NBA, so we kind of knew that was going to be a growth area for him. But he has been pretty bad defensively overall. And he's got the tools to be good. He's a really big guard. He's like 6'5". He's got a long wingspan, and obviously he's a great athlete. And I do think he plays with effort on, I think he can lock in. Like, he's capable of playing with effort on defense, and he's got the athleticism to make plays that a lot of guys can't make. So I would say if the current level of passer he is now, if he was that level of passer the rest of his career, but he got twice as good on defense. Like, that might end up serving him better, I think, in the long run.
This is what's exciting, Omari, is he's been this good, and you can see the obvious areas for him to grow and improve. And those are real, like, possible ways for him to grow and improve. I did the breakdown with Ja Morant one time, and Ja wasn't just like killing people in the mid-range in college. Like, the mid-range numbers weren't that drastically different. And I'm not comparing them as players. Ja got to the rim way more than Jaden did in college. Ja's a better passer than Jaden. I get it. I'm not saying that they're the same players. I'm just saying that guys can come into the league and get better, because Ja now is one of the top 3 floaters, mid-range guys in the league. So I'm not saying Jaden Ivey becomes that, but he can definitely improve upon that as he gets better and learns and works on his touch and controls his body. Like, there's just so many areas for him to grow, and he's already pretty good.
Ja, that was not something he did a lot in college. You know, I would assume at Murray State, he was such a plus athlete that he probably just didn't have to.
Yeah,
like,
that's
there was
true.
no reason because he was staying in front of him. But as a rookie, you know, like, even early on, like by December, he had established himself as a pretty good short mid-range shooter, and he went to his floater a little bit, and the Grizzlies wanted him to, just because he suffered some horrific flaws, like in his first 25 games in the NBA, and they were just like...
Ivy does the same thing, though. Do you ever get I get a little nervous sometimes, you know, just watching, just as a fan of the game of basketball and wanting to see good players on the floor, I do get a little nervous. He falls on his threes a lot as well.
Yeah, I would say the big difference between Ivy and Ja is that Ja would go for dunks that, like, no human being should go for, because they were just so dangerous so that he would land awkwardly. And Ivy does not quite throw himself into defenders the way that Ja did. So Ivy has had some bad falls, but, like, Ja had some falls that was like, I can't believe he didn't destroy his entire knee. Like, it is still incredible to 3 years that Ja's not had any serious injuries when he was falling, but it was something he had to work on. He had to learn how to get to the short mid-range more and just got to pick his spots a little bit. Like, you know, like jumping over Kevin Love in the middle of the regular season is going to get you highlights, but, you know, still 2 points, right? So you probably don't need to risk beheading yourself on the rim, you know, every time you go down. But I think that's something Ivy can figure out. Like, I don't think he just completely lacks the touch to develop that part of his game. But I think we see a lot that he drives and he just trusts that his athleticism will create something. And sometimes it does. And sometimes he just gets completely stuck, and, you know, the ball gets stuck and it doesn't go anywhere, and it's a turnover or a block, or the possession just kind of fizzles out. So he's kind of playing Russian roulette, I think, every time he drives. Not every time he drives, but a good amount of his drives do not have great outcomes. And I think it's him picking his spots and just learning that, like, I saw like Dwayne right now, like, those gaps close up quick, and, you know, defenders know what you're going to do, so you have to be a step ahead of them.
So speaking of injuries, Cade Cunningham, I mean, we're almost halfway through the episode and we haven't even talked about the face of the franchise and him not playing the last few games. Is there any sort of update? I know fans are going to ask. I know you sometimes get annoyed with this, Omari. I believe he's for sure out for both LA games. So I would guess he doesn't even travel to LA with the team. But do we know anything beyond that, the reevaluation day, any of that type of stuff with Cade and the shin splints?
Yeah, I mean, all we know is that, you know, he had been dealing with some shin soreness. You know, they think it was bothering up against Boston last week, and that's why he kind of had, what did he shoot, like 1 for 15 or something?
Yeah, he wasn't very good. Yeah.
You know, it wasn't good. And they're just going to shut him down to just give it a chance to heal. And the projected return game for him is next Sunday, on November 20th against the Sacramento Kings. So they'll monitor him this week and see how he looks, but almost certainly he's going to miss the Clippers and Lakers games in LA, and he'll get back, you know, sometime around midway through that trip, assuming that the shin does feel better and he doesn't have any setbacks.
I did think it was interesting when we sat in on media on Saturday and somebody asked Coach Casey about Cade. He mentioned that this was something maybe that had been bothering him a little bit going back to even the start of the season. And my takeaway from that was, like, maybe that explains the inconsistent three-point shooting. You know, whenever you get that far away from the rim, it's hard to get the ball. You need your lower body. You need your legs, every ounce of that energy to get the ball there. And maybe that's why his shot was ending up flat and short at times. If he had been dealing with this, maybe even if it wasn't all the way to the beginning of the season, but even if it was before the Celtics game for a week or two.
You know, this team does need Cade as well. Like, I know that goes without saying, but, you know, I think for, you know, him to miss time in the season this early when he's trying to get that chemistry on with Jaden, it's just really unfortunate. But I think it's tough to say exactly when he started to feel that pain. I think his jumpers looked flat this season, but some people say it kind of looked the same as it did last year. I think we all have different protractors, so the exact angle of his shots is kind of hard to get down.
That's a good idea. I'm gonna get mine out the next time I'm breaking down his shot. I didn't think about that.
So let's get the exact degree of the angle down, so we can really analyze when that shouldn't begin to bother him. But I don't disagree. I guess I'm just curious. Like, I'll be curious to see, when that Shimmy Hills, if he does see his 3-point shooting increase a little bit. Because I know one thing with Cade is that he was a solid outside shooter in high school, but he wasn't like an incredible one. And he did shoot 40% 1 year in college, but sometimes players just have, 1 year. They shoot well and, they just don't replicate it. So, I'm not saying that to say that I think Cade is going to be a career 30% shooter or whatever he is now. I know he's hovering around that, but, it's possible that he just had a little bit more work to doing this outside shot that maybe folks expected coming in.
If there is a silver lining that has come from the Cade injury, it's we've gotten Killian Hayes in the starting lineup, Omari. And honestly, his ascension started before that, but then it continued on. He's played well. He's strung together, 4 or 5 games now? And to me, it's all about the confidence. He's been confident. He's been aggressive. We've seen him stay confident and aggressive in moments and situations we used to not see him. Tonight on Monday night, he had an awful turnover. It was a really, really bad turnover from Killian. He came back the next possession and was super aggressive and did a little pull-up, mid-range contested jump shot and knocked it down. And I just don't think he ever takes that attempt before this season. So I love his mentality right now. And I also want to say, before we get your thoughts on it, it's okay that people were critiquing Killian Hayes before this 4 or 5 game stretch. Now, if you were writing him off completely, that's something different. But he was not playing well. He was not being good. This is a different version of Killian we've seen the last 4 or 5 games. So it's okay if you were critiquing him before, and then now we've seen a new version of him, and it looks really good, and there's a lot of positivity around it.
Yeah, that's what Dwayne was saying last week, where he said we're not competing for a championship, so we can just let Killian get comfortable and he's struggling, but let's write this out. Like, there's no reason to, sway his confidence right now. Which again, there are people saying bring Killian off the bench or, do this or that or whatever. Again, I think this franchise in the past has kind of shot itself in the foot, just giving up on young players too early. I remember I went to a Pistons game. This is probably back in 2014 or 15, and they're playing the Wizards. And Wizards still had, prime John Wall, and Pistons had some injuries. I remember Spencer Dinwiddie starting that game. He had 21 points and 8 assists and just looked pretty good. And I was like, oh, okay. Spencer Dinwiddie was a standout in Colorado, and he had the injury and fell to the second round. And I remember just thinking, this guy might end up being pretty good. They basically got a, first round pick for, nothing, and let's watch him develop. They ended up trading him, and of course, Dinwiddie's good now. You have Chris Middleton. You just have a lot of guys over the years. Aaron Aflalo, going back a little bit further, who ended up flourishing elsewhere. And that could still end up being Killian. It's been a week. You can't, crown him yet. But, I think just a change in approach from his game, he's attacking a lot more. He's playing free. Doesn't seem to be second-guessing himself as much. Before Monday, last 3 games, he has scored double digits each game, and it's all about scoring for him, but he has to score enough to keep the defense honest and just not avoid taking shots. You just can't have situations where you're leading a fast break and guys are expected to pass because you have a lane to the rim, right? Which we've seen him do. Which we've seen him do, a few times over the course of the last couple of years. So he's playing a lot better. I know they're happy to see that. We'll see where he takes it from here, but it seems like whatever hump he was dealing with, he's kind of gotten over it now.
Well, that was my thing. I had tweeted out, maybe you send him to the G League. Maybe you put him in the starting lineup. I just thought the organization needed to do something to change it up. It seemed like he was in a rut. And what it may have been, Omari, and I may be off on my days here, but I feel like the game before he broke out, in the post game, Dwayne Casey had a quote pretty much saying hey, we still believe in Killian. He's staying true to the process. He's doing what we want him to do. And to me, that was a outward, public support from the head coach of Killian Hayes. And I could be way overthinking this and overreading, but it seemed like Coach Casey stayed supportive of him. And maybe Killian finally felt that, and that gave him the boost and the confidence. And maybe he just broke out. Maybe he just finally decided enough is enough. But I just was saying, I felt like there needed to be something that kind of got him to snap out of it just a little bit. And whatever it was, we've seen it at least for 4 or 5 games. I'm really interested to watch to see if he just continues with this mindset, because that would be huge. He could be a really, really good bench point guard that comes in and is valuable in a lot of situations because he's really good defensively on a team that doesn't have very many good defenders.
No, I agree. The role he plays is a role that, this team needs. And I think one thing Dwayne Casey's big on, that maybe there's some disagreement there and no right or wrong answer, but he's big on consistency and just allowing guys to understand, what's expected of them and to kind of find a way to succeed within that. And that was his approach with Killian. He's like, yeah, Killian's struggling. We're playing him 17 minutes a night, and he hasn't been bringing maybe the energy he needs, but we're going to continue to give it to him, and we're going to give him a chance to snap out of it. We're not going to demote him and maybe, mess with his confidence or, well, I say demote. I always say that playing in the G League is not a demotion. It's a chance to get your confidence back. But they did not have that plan for Killian. He was asked about it the other week, and he said clearly, that's not a demotion, but we're not playing that for Killian right now. We're going to continue to give him the opportunity to thrive in the role he's in now. And it paid off. So I think it just shows that it's tough to predict this stuff. Maybe the right approach for one player is not the right approach for another one. But, I think by now they know Killian. They know that, he just has to figure things out. You just got to give him room to figure it out. Don't mess with his confidence. Don't do anything to kind of throw him off. And it did end up working out. So, again, maybe a different player. You send him to the G League, and that's enough for them to do it. I think for this coaching staff, they want Killian to know that we still trust you, we still support you, and we know you're going to figure it out.
Yeah, you have to know each player and what they're going to respond to and what motivates them and how they can get them to, play their best. And it feels like maybe they finally figured that out a little bit with Killian. We need a much larger sample size. But we're going to go to a short break here, Omari. And then whenever we come back, let's talk a little bit about Jalen Duren and the return of Marvin Bagley and Alec Burks. And then I would love for us to dive into a little bit this weekend where I got a chance to go up to Detroit and we spent some time watching Pistons basketball.
I'm Alyssa Robinson for the Detroit Free Press. When you wake up every morning, what's the first thing you do? Check your email? Me too. And when you sign up for our daily briefing newsletter, you'll get all the latest news sent directly to your inbox so you can wake up and be ready for the day. We also have newsletters about COVID-19 in Michigan, the latest entertainment headlines, as well as Woodward 248, a newsletter specifically for people living and working in Southeast Oakland County. And don't forget about automotive headlines and all the latest news from our Michigan sports teams. We have a newsletter for every personality and preference. Just head to freep.com/newsletters to sign up for any one of these great options and more.
We're back here. Let's still a couple of guys to discuss before we get into, some of the fun we had this past weekend in Detroit. But let's talk about Jalen Duren a little bit. I think we're 15 games in, and it's kind of clear that I think Duren is who he is, which there's a lot of positives with that, and then also some negatives as well. But for me, the question for him is almost exclusively he's been a lone big on the floor when he's played, and that gives him a pretty straightforward role, right? Like, you're going to set screens, you're going to roll, you're going to catch lobs, you're going to block shots, and you're going to try not to foul. And I think for the most part, he's done a pretty good job of those things. And now he's playing alongside Bagley, or he's playing alongside Stewart. And even with Isaiah taking those threes, I think that there's probably less space, in the paint for Duren to do some of the things he's used to. And, I think it's been a little bit of an adjustment for him. I think he had 11 rebounds the other night, but a little bit more of a quiet night against the Raptors on Monday. And, I think we're at the point now with Jalen where we know where he's at, but, there's some things he needs to tighten up, I think, to really, justify the minutes he's playing on some nights. I think, they just have not been able to maybe hold him accountable for some of the mistake just because they haven't had depth and probably won't have it for a little bit longer now.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see the progression, Omari. And we've talked about this. And, again, I talked about sending him to the G League to get some of these reps. And maybe that wasn't the right answer. But he's only got 3 field goal attempts in the last 3 games. He's taken 1 field goal in each of the last 3 games. Yeah, he's rebounding his butt off. He protects the rim, even though he does make mistakes still in drop coverage and some of the scheme stuff. But you can feel his presence. There's no denying that you can feel his presence. And this isn't me wavering at all on how high I am on Jalen Duren and his overall upside. I just hate the fact that this guy you selected in the lottery is only getting 1 field goal attempt a night over the last 3 games and the minutes that he's getting. I don't know how they make him more a part of the offense or get him more usage. I'm not saying he needs 10 field goal attempts, Omari, but he's got to get more touches than that, in my opinion. I would like to see that, and maybe it's on Jalen. Maybe he's got to do something different. I just feel like he needs more than that. All we saw on Monday night was the one Jaden Ivey dump off and the dunk, and it was really pretty, but I want to see more of his offensive game, and we just haven't really got to see that the last few games. Does that concern you at all, or is it just like, hey, he's the youngest player in the league, just let him do what he does well for right now?
I'm not concerned about it. I think now it's just, letting him get comfortable and letting him thrive in his role. I think offensively, maybe catching lobs and putbacks and whatnot's probably what he's best at right now. And he's kind of shown flashes of being able to knock down turnaround jumpers or, like a post hook here and there or, make some short roll passes. But, I think they're going to ease him in slowly and they don't necessarily want to overwhelm him yet. I mean, he's 18 years old and he's got a lot of development ahead of him. It wouldn't shock me if as the year goes on, we begin to see a little bit more of that. But, obviously tonight was probably one of the quietest nights he's had to play 19 minutes and really only scored 1 bucket and then 6 rebounds as well. He's been, for sure, the best offensive rebounder on this team and maybe arguably the best overall rebounder as well. So a little bit more of a quiet night, but I think long term it doesn't concern me too much. I think him being 18 years old, you kind of get a lot of leeway as far as how much you can put on his plate right now.
So the last 2 guys, the return of Alec Burks and Marvin Bagley III, I just thought we should speak on what that means for the team in general, kind of the things those guys are going to bring. We've seen instant offense from Alec Burks. I think he had 15 points in 16 minutes tonight or something like that. Had some really good scoring on Friday night against the New York Knicks. And then Bagley, we know what he did last season. Doesn't quite bring the same thing yet. We haven't seen some of the lobs and those things. But I think these 2 guys are 2 of the 10 best players. We obviously saw Bagley go into the starting lineup. Burks really helps with the spacing concerns in the second unit that you talked about at the beginning of the episode. I think these 2 guys really help the overall rotation and, as Dwayne Casey talked about, balancing out of those rotations.
Yeah, they're 2 proven bucket getters for Burks to score 32 points in his first 2 games. And, tonight it just seemed like he couldn't miss. He scored 15 points on 7 shots or something like that. He even played a little point guard, which he did at New York a lot last season with, Cade and Corey Joseph being out. So like you said, these are 2 of the top, 10 guys on the team, arguably, 2 of the top 8 guys on the team, even maybe if you really go through the whole roster. These are 2 really important rotation pieces, 2 guys who are thoroughly proven NBA scorers, and they don't do everything, but I think we've seen a big difference in the second unit, these past few games, just with them coming back and just the lift that they've given that group, which was just being asked to do way too much, I think, early on. And what's interesting is that after the game, Alex said he doesn't even feel like he's remotely himself right now. And Dwayne even said in the locker room, not in the locker room, but in his press conference after that, he's still sort of getting his conditioning back because he missed 7 months with the navicular fracture.
You just love saying navicular fracture.
I do. I had never seen that word in my life until 6 months ago, or 6 weeks ago. So I'm getting my mileage out of it now before it has to disappear from my vocabulary again. But it helps a lot. And I think just talking about depth as a whole, you need guys like that who can kind of keep the boat afloat, while the main guys per se are on the bench.
Okay, so let's say this team is completely healthy, Omari, and the starting lineup is Cade, Ivey, Boyan, Stu, and Bagley. Is the second unit, because it seems like with everybody healthy, they're going to play 10 guys. I don't think Casey's going to play 9. Is it Hayes, Burks, Bay, Livers, and Duran? Or do you think Hami still gets some minutes, Kojo gets some minutes? Doesn't look like Nerlens Noel is anything more than an emergency guy. So is it that second unit of Hayes, Burks, Bay, Livers, and Duran, in your opinion?
I think that's the second unit. I think we see Corey. Corey was already kind of being flexed out before Cade got hurt. And then, Hami as well. I just don't see how you have Hami and Burks in the rotation at the same time, especially when, Burks obviously is an above average shooter and Hami's not. I think Burks is giving you something you really need. So on paper, yeah, that's the second unit. I think, fits together really, really well. And you still have Hami as an energy guy in case, Livers or Burks or somebody gets in foul trouble or whatnot. So you still have a depth piece there. But I think those 5 probably make the most sense.
Let's talk about the weekend, man. We got 10 minutes here or so. So if you're not here for the personal conversations or whatever, then thanks for listening. And we'll see you next week where we'll talk all things. But I did get a chance to go to Detroit this weekend. And let's just start on Friday, Omari. One, it was freaking beautiful in Detroit whenever I got there. And I do want to say it snowed on me on my drive to Denver. And then it ended up snowing in Detroit the next day. And then it snowed back in Kansas on Monday whenever I got back. So I was just taking the snow wherever I went. But you and I, for the first time, got to watch a game together there at a local sports bar. And I feel like we were two completely different people as we were watching the game.
Yeah, you got to see what my game day experience is like, where I'm half watching the game and half, trying to find my instant, gamer at the buzzer, which I can't even say how many instant gamers I've written, one for every NBA game since I started covering for the Free Press. When I covered Robert Morris basketball for Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I did instant gamers at the buzzer, and then all through college, as well for basketball, football, volleyball, whatever. So, it's a little bit of a skill to it, but, obviously you're watching the game and you're, invested in it, and I'm looking up what happens, and I'm looking at my laptop, trying to take notes and type and whatnot. So, very much in work mode. It was not the typical experience you get watching a basketball game at the bar, because I was not saying many words, for long stretches of time, but it was fun, to get you, in and then to hang out downtown a little bit, with that game. And then we got you back to the LCA Saturday as well. And hours before that, shout out to our man at the Free Press photographer, David, who took some photos of us that we will use for promotional purposes on social media. What those promo purposes will be, I'm not sure yet, but I'm sure we will find opportunities to do it. And he made us look good. So excited for the readers to, see our beautiful faces and give us some feedback.
How cold was the photo shoot?
It was freezing. I was shivering the entire time. That was the first truly cold day of the fall, because it had just been weirdly in the 50s and 60s, almost the entire time, except for one random cold week in September, October. But it had been really warm. It was warm, when you got in, and then just promptly became winter. And I checked the weather for the next 10 days, and it's not going to get above 40 degrees for the next 2 weeks, and arguably probably not till March at this point. So I'm going to blame you for that. It was good up until you came, man. So I'm just blaming you. But it's all right. It's all right. That's how it goes.
It must have been. But yeah, man, David had us going all over Detroit. I don't know. Were we downtown? Would you call it downtown? Were we still downtown while we were?
Yeah, we were downtown. We started off at the Free Press office, and then we walked over to Campus Martius, and then we walked down Woodward a little bit, went to the Fist, went to the Spirit of Detroit. I got some photos with the Renaissance Center in the background. So hit some of the landmarks. So a lot of Detroit flavor. We walked past the sort of the awning. I don't know what it's called, but for the Lions draft in 2024, the countdown clock, we were over there. So all the major landmarks in downtown Detroit right now, we pretty much took photos with.
But I was just standing there, and you're shivering the whole time, we're supposed to be posing for these pictures. I was like, man, Omari, you got to stop shivering, man. It's making me. And then I look over, and Omari's got a little tear, and I think he's getting emotional. And it was just the cold weather was making his eyes water.
Yeah, I had my jacket, and we had our Pistons Pro Cities on, so I took my jacket off so we could see the logo. I was hoping I could keep the jacket on and people see you're wearing a black hoodie with the logo visible, because you weren't wearing the jacket, and I'm wearing the black hoodie with the logo covered. People would assume. Well, Barry's wearing a hoodie too, so he could just, leave the jacket on and not shiver. But we had to represent the brand. So, very, very cold. But we had actually wanted to take the photos last time you were here back in March, and it just didn't work out. So, I think, like David again, shout out to your commitment and your passion, because he probably took about 500 total photos over the course of an hour. So.
Yo, I'm in trouble at home for real, because I told Randy that I was at the photo shoot for an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm getting cooked now because I refuse to go do family pictures like I was telling you about. So this has not ended up a positive thing for me and my household. I am in the doghouse because I spent an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes doing a photo shoot and smiled and whatever for 600 pictures and then don't want to do it for the family. So I owe my wife a lot after doing that for the Free Press. And I will say, I feel like they need to get some of those hoodies in distribution because people are going to see those pictures. And I feel like some of the fans are going to want those Piston Pulse hoodies.
Yeah, we're going to have to figure something out because, merch sells and, I feel like our brand has grown enough now to where we could definitely sell a few. So maybe one day, I've never sold anything in my life. So, maybe I have to do some research on how that kind of works. Like I know that there's websites that pretty much take care of all that for you. That's not my expertise, but we'd definitely like to make it happen at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure you can YouTube it or something like that. And then I got to go to the game on Saturday. They got me credentialed. And man, that is just always such a blast to be able to do that. Sit in the media room with you guys. The best food of any media. I finally get it tested against something because on next Tuesday, not today if you're listening on the 15th, but on the 22nd, I'm going to meet you guys up in Denver, got credentialed for the Pistons at Nuggets. So I'm finally going to get a media room to compare the food because you always tell me that Detroit has the best media room food, hands down, of any place in the association.
They do. That's funny. So, I still know JB Bickerstaff because he was the Grizzlies coach, the first Grizzlies coach when I was covering the Grizzlies, and they hired the current coach after my first year there. But whenever I see JB, I always talk to him. And he came to the media room before that Cavs game the other week, and he got up and played and got some food. And, and he looked at me and he was just like, this is the only media room I come to on the road, like for the food. So there you go. When you have NBA coaches going to the media room, and that's the only media room they go to because it's the only media meal worth eating, I think that says a lot. I don't know if I'm trying to think about Denver, do they have a media store? I do think they serve media food there, and I think it's pretty good. So not every team has a media room with food in it? No. So some teams will just give you a voucher, and you can use that voucher to just get a meal from the concourse. Which road trip were we just? Okay, so like the Washington Wizards, they used to have a media meal, I believe, before COVID. And a few teams stopped doing their meals after COVID. And they now, you buy a voucher, a media voucher, and it's got like a certain amount. You buy it for a certain amount of money, and the money on the voucher is more than what you paid for it. So you can just get a bill from the concourse and do it that way. So I actually like that better because most of the media meals I kind of skip anyway. And I usually just go to the concourse because it's like I know I could get a pretty good name brand something from the concourse instead of rolling the dice on like the, whatever the specially prepared meal is. But Denver, I think they have a medium meal, so we can definitely compare that one. You can give us your review after.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit's is good. I have a really hard struggle because I don't want to waste time going there and eat because I want to sit down on the court and watch the warm-ups. And, that's the highlight of my night because I get to sit right there on the court and watch the players go through the warm-ups. And the coolest thing happened, Omari. I'm sitting there. I think you were actually still in there eating. And John Beeline just, starts looking at me from across the court. And he walks over, and it's just me and James sitting there. And I'm like, I feel like he's staring at James, but I think he's staring at me. And he just kept walking. He goes, I think I know you. And I stood up and I said, no, sir, I don't think you do, but let me introduce myself. So I introduced myself. And then James, he was a real one. He goes, yeah, John, he played Division I basketball. And so I told him my coach's name. And I don't know, it's kind of the highlight of, other than hanging out with you, of course, it was kind of the highlight of my weekend, getting to sit there and talk hoops with John Beeline for 3, 4, 5 minutes during the pregame.
If you want to rank talking to Beeline ahead of me, I'm not going to be offended. Well, I would be offended because he was the former Michigan coach, but I won't be offended as you have to talk to John Beeline situation. But, obviously I prefer, it's all right. It's cool. No, John's great. He always talks to the media a lot. Definitely one of the friendliest guys you'll talk to. Obviously a legend. Just everything he did at Michigan's awesome, and he's been a really huge asset for the Pistons. So, yeah, he always mostly's over and talks to us a lot. And maybe he recruited you or watched one of your games at some point and you just...
That's what somebody said. It was like, I was like, no, I was not good enough for John Beeline to recruit me. So, I felt super special because I was like, maybe I just look like a hooper still, even at my age, and I've gone bald and everything like that. Maybe he just thought I looked like a player or something. But I forgot, he's an investor in Cerebro. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's like they're trying to not overtake, but compete with Synergy. It's kind of these metrics or whatever. So if I see him again, I want to make sure I talk to him about that because it's something I get to use. And then I want to tell the other story. So we go to the media. I believe Jaden and Coach Casey spoke, and then you guys usually get to go to the locker room. Well, I'm not the right tier of clearance to go into the locker room. But as I'm walking back to the media room, Rodney Magruder is walking down the hallway as well. And so I stop, and I actually am friends with somebody that Rodney's friends with because he went to K-State, and he actually used to like come back to Lakin, Kansas, where I live, for Thanksgiving and stuff with this guy. So I throw out the guy's name, and Rodney's like, how do you know him? I was like, man, I live in the same town in Lakin. And Rodney was just like, that's crazy. So I got to talk to, long story short, I got to talk to Rodney Magruder for a few minutes walking down the hallway as well. So it was a pretty cool experience always, but those two interactions just was kind of icing on the cake.
Yeah, Rodney's great as well. We always talk about just what Rodney brings to this team as just a veteran. And then, you talk to him, and I think it kind of becomes, clear why he just fits the team so well and why he's been so helpful to the guys on the team. So, you got to live the media experience again. You'll do it again next Tuesday when we're in Denver. And, it's awesome, man. Like, it's a fun team to cover, a lot of good dudes. So really happy you got a chance to come out. You're only in Detroit for like 36 hours. It's such a quick trip, but you got a little bit of a taste of what it's like.
Yeah, whenever I come back in April, Randy's coming with me. We're going to stay out there for, a handful of days, see 2 games, get to really hang out and spend some time. And another cool part of Mari was I got to meet Kirk Crawford, who we'll shout out in just a second. We got to hang out after the game for a little while, met him in person. And then the craziest thing is your sports editor, you've only met in person, like 2 or 3 times?
Yeah, I think that was only like the second time I had met him, which is crazy, obviously, giving up at the Free Press for like 2.5 years. They're trying to get, the ed respect office a little bit more. So Kirk was, downtown at the office, and, we're at the game not too far away. So he decided to join us after, and, great guy. And I'm going to shout him out shortly when I close this pod out. But glad we all got to get together, and hopefully I'll get to see my own bosses a little bit more often, soon, now that we're finally trying to get post-COVID here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, whenever he said that, I was like, you guys are joking, right? And then I was like, no, this is legit. So, but hey, next week we'll have a great episode for you guys. I'll be in Denver on Monday night with Omari. So we're going to record one together in person, drop that first thing for you on Tuesday. And then I'll get to experience that game in Denver against the Nuggets on Tuesday night. Omari, it was a great weekend. I appreciate so much for everything, driving me around, taking me to different places. You're a real one for it, but take it away right here.
Hey, man, you're a real one for making the trip to Detroit for the second time this year. And you have another trip in April, and then we'll see each other in Denver next week. So definitely we'll have a lot to talk about during our next episode. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Big thanks to our editor, Kirkland Crawford, who, I finally met for the second time 2 days ago. Our executive producer, Antoinette Delgado, our audio producers, Robin, who's staying up late Monday night, to handle editing for us. Big thanks. Last Monday night game for a while, so we'll let shout out to it for a couple months here. And a shout out to West Davenport. We'll talk to you all next week.